You know what we should talk about today? We should talk about expectations because everybody loves talking about their expectations. No, they don't. Okay, so everybody's upset in the world today because the only reason anybody ever gets upset is because an expectation hasn't been met. So if we could talk about expectations more, maybe people would be less upset, don't you think? Well, if you knew what expectations were, where they came from, and what to do when you were upset, you personally could be a happier person. And I just so happen to have a book on the subject. So check it out, read it, and let me know what you think. Have a great day.
Welcome back to The Gold Mind. Our next segment, I interview Ben Winter, an author as well as an entrepreneur. His business, Success Improv, helps businesses build better teams. Let's take a listen to our interview. So welcome to The Gold Mind. Thank you for joining me, Ben Winter.
Yeah.
So the first question I have for you, did you grow up in an entrepreneurial family?
You know, it's kind of funny you actually asked that question. Growing up, I didn't think so, because my dad left at the same time every day. He went to an office every day. Like, he did the corporate life, from what I could tell. And it turned out he was an independent insurance agent. So in a way, he was kind of an entrepreneur in that he had to generate his own money. But I didn't know that. He never taught me that. And so I grew up thinking I had to go into corporate life. And so that was the first thing that I did. So no, it took me 10 years of corporate life to learn that I could be something else.
So what was the inspiration? What caused you to realize you needed to start Success Improv? What caused all that?
So Success Improv, I started 5 years after starting a different business. And it was a combination of many different things. One was doing improv. Excuse me. One was doing improv. Another was having the business, and then also doing a lot of personal growth work. And so as I was doing all of those things, it all just kind of came together as like, I need to teach improv to groups of people, not for being on stage, but to use these practices in daily life. And so that's kind of where that was born from.
So what is Success Improv, and what do you offer to your clients?
So Success Improv is a teaching methodology of using improv in your daily life, in business. It's kind of niched into team building because people assume that if you're having fun, you must be doing team building, even though you can use it just for anything that's more or less attitude related. So corporate culture, for example, is one great way to utilize improv. So I basically go into corporations and I teach improv, the rules and techniques of improv and how they relate to whatever it is that they want me to relate it to. So typically it's team building. Not a whole lot of that going on right now with COVID, obviously, but it is definitely a lot of fun when I get to do it.
How did the improv world find you? How did that happen?
So I went to several shows when I was younger, and after every show they would say, "Hey, we have improv classes," and I was always like, "Man, I'm not good enough for that. I'm not smart enough, I'm not funny enough, or anything like that." And it took actually dating somebody who I eventually married, but she decided doing some personal growth work that she was going to take an improv class, and I was like, "Well, okay, well, you've taken away every excuse I could possibly have. I've got support going to it. And since I always wanted to, I went with her. And day one, had the class, and the guy is like, "Hey, there are rules to improv. If you follow the rules, you'll be successful at improv." And I was like, "I can follow rules. What are these rules you speak of?" And so I just sort of went into the class, came out of it absolutely loving it. Because at the end of the class, you get to perform for all your friends and family. And I just had the most fun ever on stage. So kind of one of those, I found my calling sort of things.
Talk about your book. Give me a summary, and then why did you write it?
I'm guessing you're talking about the Expectations book?
Expectation book, yes.
Okay. because I have several. So
Oh, sorry. Yes,
no,
expectations.
it's all good. So the expectation book was written a couple years ago, just over a year ago, I believe. Um, One of the things that I came across when doing improv training is that there's expectations that occur. So when you're on stage, sometimes you expect a scene to go one direction, but it goes a completely different direction. And you have to actually train yourself to not think ahead. But in real life, that's not something that we, can typically do on a regular basis. We have expectations. There's no way of getting away from them. And so by doing all this work, I kind of came to this realization that expectations are one of those things where a lot of times when we get upset, we just didn't know we had the expectation to begin with, and it's going unmet. And too often we just started to lash out at people like, well, now I'm angry at you because you didn't do what I wanted you to do, but I didn't even realize I wanted you to do it. So now, my being upset at you is unfounded. And so I kind of thought about it more and more, and I was like, okay, well, there's this giant world called expectations, and maybe it would be worth walking through them and figuring out, like, where do they come from, what to do when they come up, and just lots of fun stuff around there. So it really does explore expectations pretty succinctly and straight to the point, so people can get the information and actually use it to change their lives.
Is there a tip you can share with people on learning how to, because like improv, you can expect them to do something and then have in your mind what you're going to do in response, but when they don't do it, you have to quickly rethink. And so what is a tip to give people in real life, not just in work, but in relationships, to realize not everything is going to be the way you want it? And so you got to find a way to, rethink. And so what is a tip you can give?
So one of the main rules of improv that most people, if you ask them, like, when they think about the rules of improv, they'll say yes and that is one of the biggest rules of improv. And it's really just kind of accepting what is and moving forward with it, rather than against it. Because a lot of times when you think about, COVID is going crazy. Some states and cities are putting down a lockdown again. That is what is. And either you can get upset about it and fight it and become one of those people that ends up on YouTube not wearing a mask and yelling at people, or you can just say, okay, well, if I'm stuck at home again, what can I do about it? Or what can I do with it? What other hobby have I wanted to try? How can I work from home? How can I get in shape from home? It's about accepting what is. And until you accept what is, there's no way of growing from there. There's no way of having anything different. Every time you fight what is, then nothing's going to change. You're just fighting. So that would be the quick and easy tip, I guess.
I would definitely say this year has been a huge learner on actually using your improv skills, because I'm sure many people had many expectations for 2020 and now had to use improv to rethink their expectations. This definitely was a great year for me, only because I improv my way out of it. But so even though you say your dad was somewhat of an entrepreneur, I'm sure you said he didn't sit you down and teach you whatever steps there are to be an entrepreneur. So for the person out there who knows they're supposed to be an entrepreneur, they're thinking about it, they're struggling with the thought of it, especially in this pandemic. If you've ever wanted to be an entrepreneur, now is the time to do so. What advice or some tips can you give someone into starting a business, whether it be at home, whether it be, whatever the case may be online? What are a tip or two you can give someone who's struggling with the idea?
Yeah, first and foremost is don't do it alone. And what I mean by that is there are so many resources out there to help you along the way. You got to know how to structure your business. You got to figure out how you're going to pay your taxes on your business. You got to figure out legalities and insurance and, figuring out your target market, figuring out all the various pieces. It's not a huge amount of work. Don't think of it as, oh, I've got all these hurdles I have to jump over. No, if you have a great idea, I say go for it. I'm all for the entrepreneurial life. but don't just try and figure it out on your own. There are mentors out there that'll help. There, one of the big things when you're an entrepreneur is to network, and that's just to meet people. And the more people you meet, the more connections you have, and eventually you'll reach that point where now I have a lawyer I can talk to. Now I have an accountant I can talk to. Now I have a mentor who's been successful at business, and I don't have to stumble over those same things that they stumbled over. I know the Small Business Administration has like local outlets everywhere, and they have mentor programs and free resources. Find those free resources and utilize them. So, I mean, that's the big thing, is just don't do it alone. It takes way too much effort when you do it alone. And you also end up hurting yourself if you do it alone, because you might hit that obstacle and do the wrong thing, and now you're paying for it. So